right, we are back. Let's talk about activities in late adulthood, and we have to start with work. So late adulthood is usually going to start in most people's model by at about the age of 65, which a lot of us, of course, associate with retirement, right? A lot of people kind of think that's the golden year when you stop working. But a lot of people over the age of 65 continue to work. I pulled just some examples. I pulled Judge Judy. I don't know if she's ever going to stop working, right? And then I pulled Ronald Reagan because he was notably older when he became president. He was 68. In our last presidential election, all of the candidates in the final few were 70-year-old or just about to turn 70. So, there are people who work past the age of retirement, obviously. CEOs are oftentimes still working past 65. Walmart hires greeters, who they probably work part-time and it's, extra money for them and like that. Or it might be something they really, really need. And so, it could be that they're working because they, need the social support that comes from going to work. The people who are pleased to see them and, when they're having difficulties, the coworkers help support them and stuff like that. Also gives them status. I think we could all argue being a judge or being a president, that's status filled. A lot of professors don't retire at 65. I've always joked, I became a professor when I was 28, and I was like, man, I can't imagine why I would ever stop doing this. It's such an easy job. Seriously, you get to read stuff you like. You get to convert it into things that other people now can understand and get passionate about. It's not like I'm doing jumping jacks or climbing a building or something. Like, this is really physically easy, so I can't imagine why I would ever stop doing that. I think that's a pretty common attitude among a lot of professors, where we're like, this is a pretty awesome job. Of course, when I was 28 and looking for a job, I was thinking, couldn't somebody give up their job? I need one. But it does. It gives you status, it gives you social support, it makes you, gives you a place to go every day. It's a self-esteem booster to work. A lot of people, 3 out of the 4 in these pictures I provided are doing it not because they have to financially. And that's something to keep in mind for some people who are working past retirement. They may not be doing it for the money per se. They may be doing it for these other things. I'm not sure what the motive of the lady in the Walmart vest is, because I don't know her. I pulled her off the internet. But some older people are working because financially they need to work. And so there are different motives among different people, age bracket, for why they continue to work. What we're seeing is over time, with the past 25 years, 35 years, there's been an increase in participation in the workforce for between the ages of 65 and 69. So it used to be about a fifth of people of that age bracket were still working or had returned to work, and now it's more like a third. Some of that happened because of the economic downturn. There were people who came out of retirement. I'm not sure the economic logic of that explanation for why we saw that increase in people coming back to work. Maybe their pensions had lost their money or something. I'm not exactly sure how the economic downturn, because now you're competing against younger people who also needed to work during the economic downturn. And younger people, you can pay them lower salaries. And so I'm not exactly sure what benefit being 65 to 69 would have, except for that whatever your retirement plan was fell through. When the stock market dropped, a lot of people's 401ks tanked. Some cities went bankrupt and people entirely lost their pensions that they had been counting on since they were, in their 30s. They assumed they'd have that pension. So some people were driven back to work during that economic downturn. What's interesting is that we're not seeing people rushing back out of work. We're seeing a lot of people between 65 and 69 still working. Now, the thing about work, with the exception of needing to earn an income, the social supports, the status and the self-esteem boosts can also be achieved through volunteer work. But what's really interesting is that we find that people who are 65 and over are a lot less likely than other adult age groups to actually volunteer. We see that the volunteering rate has been going up. Over the 2005-2015 data, we're seeing that more people over the age of 65 are volunteering. And I got to doing the math, and I was looking at, for example, if we look at the rates of volunteering among 45 to 55-year-olds, you look at the blue and the red bars, those are the 1974, 1989 data. So let's just look at the red square in the 45 to 54 category. Now, if you come over to the 2005 data for the 65 and over, now you have those 45 to 54-year-olds having aged to 65 and over. And what you're noticing is it's pretty consistent. The 2005 data for the 65 and over is pretty consistent with 45 to 54 data from 1989. So maybe what we're tapping into is that if we follow a cohort, 45 to 50-year-olds, as they age into 65 and over, they're maintaining their level of volunteerism, which is consistent with what I was talking about in the last segment, continuity theory. If you continue with things that you had been doing once you retire, that fosters the best social adjustment in retirement. So maybe what we're seeing in this chart is cohorts aging and displaying continuity. All right, so retirement. Found this on the internet. I can't remember who I lifted it from. But so they go, health genes made up of exercise, social activity, diet, genes, and productive pursuits. I'm always really, really nervous about saying this is what you need for healthy that. Because healthy is sort of a euphemism for good, what you should be doing, right? And so we have genes. Okay, there's not a lot you can do about what genes you inherit. And that does play a really big impact on your physical health through the aging process, as well as your psychological health throughout the aging process. So, okay, I will give you genes. I will give you diet. Well, it has an impact on health, right? And exercise probably has a big impact on health. Of course, health has a big impact on exercise, doesn't it? A person has, a knee injury, it may impact their levels of exercise. So you got to remember that correlations can flow both directions, right? So there's a correlation between exercise and healthy in adulthood, and it could flow either way. Where I'm a little bit wary is to say social activity is what leads to healthy aging, because that makes the natural introverts among us who really enjoy being and really enjoy maybe going to a social setting, like let's say, a concert. They're not really socializing, right? They want to see the live performance, but they really don't want to talk to the people sitting next to them and stuff like that. Some of us are just more introverts, and we get a lot more stimulation from stuff going on inside of us than we do from the people around us. So if I'm not a social butterfly, am I not healthily aging? Is that what you're trying to tell me? That I'm actually shortening my lifespan because I'm not a social butterfly? So I'm always nervous about these kinds of graphics. Productive pursuits. Whose determination is productive? Like, I love to knit, and I always have a plan for what I'm knitting. I'm like, I'm making a sweater. And then I'll knit and knit and knit. It'll take me 3 months. I'll finally get done, and I'll say, this is horrible. I'll rip the entire thing out. Now, is what I did productive or not productive? Because I ended up in exactly the same condition at the end as I was at the beginning. So did I just do something productive or something unproductive? Right? Whose eyes get to behold the productivity of our pursuits? So I'm a little nervous about these kinds of, this is what you would need to do in order to have whatever this amorphous, healthy aging really is. Okay, so that's my little diatribe. I think we can all agree that imbalance and what is appropriate for that individual, not pushing them outside their comfort zones of their natural personality and stuff like that, is probably what we're talking about. Housing. Housing is a big issue in late adulthood. A lot of us wish that we could just age in place. I just want to live in my house. That's all I want. I picked this house. I decorated this house. I raised my kids in this house maybe. My grandparents moved into their house in 1953. It was a brand new tract house in Garden Grove, California. Moved in there. My mom was 10 and her brother, my uncle, was 6, just about to turn 7. And so they raised their kids there. They lived there through my grandfather's working years. He retired there. They owned it free and clear. I remember going to their house and having their mortgage burning party. The whole thing. they did all the things that a lot of people wish for, and they wanted to age in place, and they did. My grandmother said, my brother said to my grandma one time, why don't you and Grandpa move to, like a retirement community or move out to the desert or something? And Grandma goes, oh no, the only way I'm ever leaving this house is feet first. And my brother was a little aghast that my grandma would say that. He's like, oh my God, I can't believe Grandma said that. Like, that's a little graphic, isn't it? That's how she felt. She's like, this is my home. Why would I move? A lot of people have that kind of attitude about their home. This is my home, why would I leave? And so the goal in aging in place would be to remain in the same home and really having that community. My grandparents lived in that house from 19. My grandma died in 1905, and Grandpa in 2000 literally lived in that house for 50 years. And of course, neighbors came and neighbors went. But everybody he was like the elder in the neighborhood, literally. People all knew who he was. I live here in Seattle, and he was in Garden Grove. And as he got older, and he was there by himself, and my parents had sailed away on their sailboat, and so I would check on him. And he knew all of the neighbors and their phone numbers, and so he gave me all their phone numbers and said, if you ever try and call me and I don't answer, go ahead and call one of the neighbors, and they'll let you know if I'm home and I'm okay. And it's just like, he was very integrated into the community, right? He didn't want to leave. Even though he was starting to have, we'll just call them spells, that's what he liked to call them, he didn't want to leave his house. He's like, I'm fine. It's okay. I'm fine. He didn't want to leave. So aging in place, for a lot of people, that's the key. Sometimes a neighborhood becomes what's called a naturally occurring retirement. That's where the neighborhood seems to attract mostly retirees, or maybe a lot of retirees have aged in place. And we've all been living here for a really long time, and we've all, like all the younger families have grown up and now have become us, and we're all a bunch of retirees. The thing about aging in place or naturally occurring retirement communities is that you can maintain your social convoy that way. The people who are still in your neighborhood are still in your neighborhood. And so people, you feel like you've got your friends, you feel like you've got your support system. So that's one of the benefits of aging in place, and especially those aging in places that turn into naturally occurring retirement. Of course, there are other options, right? You guys have seen commercials for the active senior facilities where the assumption is that you're a healthy person who's past retirement. Maybe you don't feel like mowing the lawn anymore, or maybe you qualify now for lower rent. And you would like to move into something smaller and not have to pay as much, and maybe be closer to amenities of different sorts. Like some active senior facilities are in downtown areas, so you can walk to go shopping, or you can walk to the movie theater, or to go to your places and do your things. And the assumption is that you're active and healthy, and that you're going to be integrated in the community, and you're just surrounded by other seniors. And a lot of times these active senior facilities have clubs, and cooking instructions will, some instructor will come to the place and show everybody how to make something. It's like they have the activities and plans and things to do. Retirement communities can really significantly vary from one place to the other. There's the classic retirement communities in Phoenix that were developed for the parents of baby boomers, the silent generation. And it was for people who had lived and raised their kids in Minnesota or Michigan or one of the cold places, and they're like, I am tired of this cold. And they moved to Phoenix. And a lot of them would live there all through the winter and then go home to wherever they came from in the summertime, things like that. And these retirement communities were designed specifically for the needs of older people. They're like, you know what, maybe you don't want to drive your giant car to go get dinner. So hey, we can allow golf carts here, and you can drive them on the street. Or they have clubhouses where people can get together and have, meetings, or bunko nights, or these kinds of things in retirement communities. And they really vary. A lot of times they are independent homes, and it's just a community. Sometimes they're apartment complexes. Sometimes they're associated with assisted living facilities, so that you start off in the retirement part of it, or the active senior part of it, and then you move into the assisted living part of it if you need assisted living. And that's usually for people who have some kind of illness, and they've moved into the frail elderly category, which we'll talk about later. Problems with these three types is that they can be expensive. I mean, these are going to be pretty self-limiting. You've got to be able to move. You've got to be able to afford the rent on it. I mean, some older people age in place not because they want to, but because they've paid the mortgage off and they can afford it. And actually, sometimes they'll get taxed out of that place, and so their property taxes go up, up, up. And the only reason why they had to move is because they can't keep up with it. So a lot of times, older people will age in place not by choice but by economics. And so these senior facilities and retirement communities and stuff cost a lot, and the assisted living facilities cost a lot. So those are expensive. Now, of course, if you move, you're not taking all your friends with you usually. It's going to disrupt your social convoy. In fact, it might take you away from your extended family and things. You know, if you're a Minnesotan and you're going to spend your winters in Phoenix, you're probably not taking your kids and grandkids and everybody going with you. You're probably spending 6 to 10 months away from all the people you know. So you're going to social convoy. And then there are the benefits, right? You have things to do, other people of your basic peer group to do stuff with. And there's security. I mean, all of these cases, there's protections for everybody. There's security, there's medical staff, there's all this stuff that will help a person to feel more active in their older years. So there are trade-offs, right, for these different choices in housing. What about religious involvement? It turns out that with age, expressions of faith like praying, other kinds of religious practices that a person might engage in tend to increase. So as we age, we become more practicing of whatever faith we may have sort of had in the back burner when we were younger. Religious institutions can fulfill many needs for people of any age. They give you, a social situation, they give you social support, they might give you status. There are a lot of different things that can come from participating in religious institutions, not to mention the part that it's designed for, which is, to bring you closer to your faith. It turns out, though, that as people age, even though they become more practicing of their religion, they actually may be less likely to attend religious services than they were when they were middle-aged. And it may have to do with, they can't sit in the pews anymore because it hurts their back, or maybe their religion requires kneeling and their joints can't do it anymore, things like that. Maybe it's too difficult, they can't drive anymore, and it's too difficult to get a ride, or things of that nature. So even though they are more faithful than they probably were when they were younger, they may not be able to go to religious services as frequently. My grandparents were really big in what's it called? Well, it became the Crystal Cathedral, and it was called something else when they started it. And when they joined the church, it started to grow really fast. So they started holding services at the drive-in. I mean, it got really big really fast. And so my grandparents were really active in it, and but then by the time they got into their 70s, they weren't really able to be going to church anymore and things like that. But what was great is there are TV broadcasts, or today web-based broadcasts, and so a lot of older people are able to stay connected with their house of worship through the use of technology. So that's kind of nice. My last activity I wanted to talk about was political activism. It turns out that with age, over 65 people are more likely to write letters to their representatives. They're more likely to vote. They're more likely to be registered with the party than people who are younger. They're less likely to attend rallies or to volunteer for campaigns. So their political activism takes a different route than younger people. There's maybe a little less overt passion and a little bit more just sort of behind the scenes kinds of activities, things that can be done within their sphere of influence. If we look at turnout, you'll see as people age, they become more and more likely. And you'll notice this is the 2014 general election. They like to really measure voter turnout on the non-presidential years, because people will get really passionate about presidential elections and turn out for those. You're a serious voter when you show up on the off elections. So in the 2014 general election off year, you see that if you were over 65, you were much more likely to vote than if you were under 65. And with each era, you see people becoming more likely to vote. So whereas the 18 to 24-year-olds are the most likely to be out doing activism kinds of things, holding protests and making a lot of noise and a big show, they're less likely to vote. get a lot of quietness during the middle years where they aren't likely to show up for the rallies, but they also kind of aren't that likely to vote. So they're sort of in the middle, maybe busy with other stuff. By older age, people are more likely to actually vote, register, and write their representatives. All right, it's a good time to stop. We'll come back and we'll finish with our last segment on friends and relatives.